To our participants, okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our session on how to frame a problem. For this session, we have the CERN startup team with us who are going to present their approach on how to frame a problem when working on an idea or on a project. So for the first part, we have Ash, who's doing the more theoretical part of this workshop, and afterwards, Valentina will give you more insight on her project, her own idea, how she worked on it, and yeah, she'll give you her own personal insight. And yeah, without any further delay, I will bring you Ash and Valentina.
Thank you.
Good morning. If you're all wondering, I think if you're the youngest participant in it, you can't beat a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old. So I think they are the youngest today.
Yes, as you can see, Ash can't do the presentation like this live, so we have recorded it as a video.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ash Ravikumar, and I am the Entrepreneurship Development Officer with CERN Knowledge Transfer Group. So today, I'm going to be talking about how to find a problem worth solving. Just to give you a background of what I do at CERN, we want to have good startups come and take our technology and use it outside of the original purpose of high energy physics that CERN worked on. And also, we want to create more entrepreneurs and founders coming out of CERN. So that's my 2 big mandates that I'm working on at CERN. So first mistake most entrepreneurs do when they create companies is to create a solution, get married with a technical solution, and then try to find a problem to solve. Now, this is akin to having a light bulb as an invention and then searching for a dark room to saying, where can that be used? Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, one of the best startup accelerator programs, came up with this slogan saying, make something that people want. So the key is, what do people want? How do you figure out what people want? You can start with a big problem where you say, this is a big vision where there's nothing that exists, and I'm going to build something for people I've never seen. So if you think about Google or the Teslas or the Amazon, when they came and when they built something, the world didn't have something that is comparable to, right? So, and they had these big vision statements to saying, I'm going to build a company to organize the whole world's information and then make it searchable. That was Google's mission when they built the company. If you look at Tesla, they wanted to accelerate transition of the world to sustainable energy. So they've got the car, electric cars, and also the battery system. So they have really big visions when they started out. And these entrepreneurs or founders have these huge vision, and they get and gravitate people towards it to saying, I'm going to build the next private spacecraft company, and I want to get the best people to build these new spacecrafts. And you've got to raise a lot of money to get there. So that's the big problem. But you might be thinking, well, I don't have these big problems. No worries. Most entrepreneurs don't start with these big visions. 99% of all the startups they created didn't have these big visions saying, I'm going to change the world with my technology. However, you still need to find the problem that is worth solving, i.e., how many people care about what you're trying to build. So how do you find this problem that is worth solving? This is entirely inspired by an article written by Manu Kumar, who is a founder of a venture capital firm called K9 Ventures, based in Silicon Valley. And the link for the blog is here, and it's absolutely taken from there. And I had a profound effect of how he looked at, looking at problems that are worth solving. So the way it goes is you've got, 4 parameters to look at, right? The first 3 are frequency, density, and pain. So the way you look at it is frequency. Does this problem occur often? And how often does it happen? How many people face this problem? Do a lot of people have this issue on a daily basis? Or how many people have this problem? Then the third is pain. Is this a problem which is just an annoying factor, or is this absolutely they must solve? Think about it as a painkiller versus a vitamin. When do you take a painkiller? You've got pain and it has to stop, and so you will get that solution. Whereas if it's a vitamin, it's a nice thing to have, better hair, skin, whatever. So vitamins are a nice to have, but whereas a painkiller is a must to have. So the other way to look at it is also, do people really care about this problem? And then last part is friction, right? How hard is it for the users to understand or access or use the solution that you provided? I.e., how hard is it for them to pay you if you build a product and a service? So when, I would really recommend for you to read the article. One of the examples that he gives is that Manu was on the board of a company called Zimride, which became Lyft in the US. For people who don't know Lyft, it is like Uber, exactly like Uber. So Lyft, when they started out, their problem was to do it as a ride-sharing company. And the aim was to reduce congestion because there's a lot of cars in LA, and they wanted to reduce it. So they looked at when Manu said that he wanted on the board, he looked at it and asked them this 4 questions to saying, do the problem occur often? How many people, how often do they go from Los Angeles to San Francisco? They go so quite often. How many people go from LA to San Francisco? Quite a few. Or, every day there are people flying between these 2 cities. So that's the key, right? What is the pain? They can fly. They've got 8 flight options. They can take a train. They can drive. So the pain is not really there, although you've got the frequency and density. So they pivoted to saying, why not we look at the problem on frequency density to saying, how hard is it for you to go from downtown LA to Southern California? That is really hard, because then, how often do you do it? Yeah, I've got a meeting in the, in the business district, so I have to go from downtown to business district, or etc. How many people do it? Lots of people. Now, what are the pain points? I'll have to find a driver. I have to drive. I have to find a parking spot, etc., etc. But when you say that as a problem, now it defines a lot more on your frequency and density. And then if you say, well, the friction part comes in. How else can you go? I can take a taxi. What are the friction problems? I don't want to give my credit card to a stranger. I don't trust it. The service is bad. It doesn't show up when I need. So then their solution made sense to have an app which will take care of knowing when your car will be there, a better service, and also a friction on their payment solved. I don't have to give the credit card. I've got a secure app which will transfer the money, and I don't have to do the transactional bit. So the friction part was removed. So when you're building something, look at it as to saying how often, how many, and most importantly, do they really care? And then you can figure out the friction part and the monetization aspect of how are you going to sell and make money out of that. So after all this, there's still 3 questions that will come up on the why, right? Why do you care? Why do you care about this problem? So try to get your narrative done on, this is a problem which is close to me because I have this problem and I'm trying to build a solution, right? And the next is to say, why would anybody else care? Is it a problem that only you have? Test it with other people. And why will you as a team or you as a founder will make this happen? Saying, what is that you have the unique, diverse skill sets? And so the team importance. These are the 3 whys that you need to answer from a team to saying what your solution or the problem that you're addressing makes sense. Next, the other whys. This will be very often that people will always have skepticism on your solution, on the problem. And for founders, I always say, or entrepreneurs who are going to be founders, I always say this: be ready for people who will have this and say, this will never work. Primarily because there is nothing that you can compare it to, right? Especially when you think about those big problems and big visions. The questions will be, why would anybody use the internet to search? Or why would anybody buy anything online? Circa 1990s, early 2000s, right? Why would anybody watch other people play video games? This was when, Twitch was founded. But the question that, how do you overcome this? The first answer is why not, right? You'll need to figure out in your narratives on whys, and then answer those questions of, the skepticism to saying, why not? If people would watch other people play any game, football, cricket, you still can say, well, that's a transition. If people can play, professional athletes play, the video game community is also becoming, e-games is becoming a professional community that, they can stream live games because there is a skill involved in it. So the first answer is why not? That you need to tell yourself to convince yourself that this is worth what you're doing. The second is more important, is validation, right? The best way to validate is build something, a prototype, so that you can test what your idea for a problem that you've identified, build something, then test it over and over to make sure that it actually works. Then get feedback from others on the actual end users to saying, this solve your problem. We've talked about identifying your problem. Now I've got a solution. Does this make sense? What else would you want? Why doesn't this work? Or why doesn't this address your problem? And then iterate, because you'll have a variety of answers of some people liking it, some people hating it. That's the diversity. But then you can iterate and have different segmentations to understand what that user group's needs are, these user groups' needs are, and then keep on iterating to make sure that your solution fits into or addresses many problems, or as many problems as you can think of. But I'll leave you with these last two things, right? So the most important thing within validation is you have a very good solution and nobody knows about it. Still a failure. You've got a bad solution and nobody tells you it is bad. It's still a failure, right? So the only way to break this asymmetry is to actually talk with users, right? If you have a good solution, people will become evangelists for your own product and they will sell it for you. They will spread the word across and say, look at this amazing thing I found. If it is bad, they'll also either tell you it's bad or give you suggestions how to improve it. The second part is rare, but you can ask for suggestions. But it at least will tell you that what you're doing is not good, so that you can change course or pivot with the new parlance to saying that your solutions can fit to what the user needs are. The last slide, thanks for listening and good luck for your hackathon. And if you have any questions on any of this, what I talked about, or if generally you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Look forward to talking to you, and best of luck. Cheers.
Well, thank you very much, Ash, for this presentation. And I mean, as we all can see, you're challenged with the home office, but you did your best. So we much appreciated your effort. So thank you very much. And yeah, so now we go on to Valentina, who's going to give her personal insight on how she realized her idea.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm Valentina. I work with Ash in the entrepreneurship team since February, but I work at CERN since 8 years. And we talk about this startup I'm into now, and how I got my idea. So we can start the slides. And so I'm a very big fan of sailing. I was sailing since the age of 8 and doing a lot of competitions for over 25 years. In 2016, while I was doing my PhD at CERN, I was in a competition in Yacht Club Monaco, where you have basically the most expensive boats and environment you can imagine. And yes, if you see the comparison between the advancement in the sailing world compared, for example, to the drones or to the fishermen, we were really late there. So I discovered that something could be solved. I show you what was the problem. In the picture down, you see a starting line of a regatta. Next slide. And normally when you have a sailing competition, you have a kind of parkour to go around. So you have marks that are placed in an exactly calculated angles with the wind. So the starting line you saw before, you see here on the bottom, there is a boat and a starting mark that has to be, next slide, perfectly perpendicular with the wind direction. And normally the first course is down against the wind. And then you go to Mark 2, for example. There are many kind of different shapes, but this is just an example. If the wind changes, you want to have something like in figure 2, so you want to reset everything. So if you go to the next slide, you start from your previous setting, and then you have to shift all the marks. So you have to go with your motorboat. You can show the next slide. You have to go with a motorboat and lift anchors that are sometimes attached to a line that can be even hundreds of meters long. So this was something really painful in general. So when you have deep waters, setting a regatta field is very hard. And not only, every time the wind changes, you have to change all the buoy setting. So this was something that for many years was a big problem. Next slide. And not only for the time that you have to wait while you are there racing, and maybe you have bought a flight to arrive there, and in a day, maybe you manage to do 3 races, because it takes 1 hour to shift the buoys, but also the volunteers needed for these operations are a lot. And then there is the pollution subject, next slide, which is something that not even all sailors know, but in many places in the world where the water is very deep, they have weights and they leave them inside the water with all the line. So they have biodegradable lines, but anyway, this is a kind of pollution that last year was coming out in the press, and a lot of clubs in Garda Lake were sued for that. And the other kind of pollution that I mean is the CO2 emissions. So if you could have something that stays in place with an electric engine without an anchor, that would be much less polluting, because the way the energy you use to move something very light is not the same that you use for moving the whole boat to go there and displace the buoys. So if you go to the next slide. So my idea was to build something that was like a drone, but on the water. So something inflatable or anyway floating that you could see with the boats and could stay in place. So this was the minimum requirement. So something that stays in place without an anchor. But then, of course, for realizing, the realization, you need to have liftable on a boat, because sometimes you have big displacement to do and you cannot wait for it to go alone. And then you have it remotely controllable, sorry. And the other mast is that is visible and affordable. So also I valued a bit the aesthetic, because this is something that some clubs look at. And if you go to the next slide, this was my first prototype in 2018. So I have found an engine from the fisherman world. As I said before, they were very advanced, because they have some engines, electric engines, that they put on the bow of the boat, and they can stay in place without putting an anchor. So they really have developed something very fun, very nice for them. And I put this engine on an object that I designed just as a first guess. And it was, okay, quite liftable on a boat. It was still a bit difficult. It was not remotely controllable, because I had a small remote control with Bluetooth, so I could stay 20 meters, but it was visible and affordable. If you go to the next slide, and I call it SMART, by the way, Smart Mark. At the same time, the 2 competitors came out. So one was from a Swiss company, the first one that you see on the left side. It's a buoy that is 100 kilos, so not liftable on a boat. It was remotely controllable, but visible and touchable. This is important not only for the boats to see it, but there is a whole game around touching a mark. So when you have something that is not proper to be touched, then you lose a lot of fun in sailing. So this was to me a so-so solution. and it cost 10,000 euros. The second one was an American one. It is still on the market, so it's not liftable on a boat as well. It has everything, and it's also not affordable. So what I try to do, next slide, is to do something that could be as close as possible as perfection for me. So a year later, I found an inflatable that was already making my boy liftable on a boat for sure. But still, I had the problem of the remote control. So I could just move it from a boat at distance with a remote control. And yeah, the inflatable, unfortunately, I found it as it was, and I couldn't change the shape. So that made things not easy. But anyway, second slide. Yeah. Anyway, I decided to apply for CERN BIC, but I didn't get any technology, unfortunately, on my boy, but was automatically on the Swiss Innovation Challenge. And in my pitch, I managed to be selected for the first step. So in that moment, for the second step, they asked me to write a 15 to 30 pages business plan. And at the time, I was really scared of that. And I was starting to be, to have the feeling that this boy was not going so far anyway because of my lack of skills in this business world. So I felt like in a jungle. If you go to next slide, I then got interested in big projects, in startups, but I abandoned a bit the boy. So after the Swiss Innovation Challenge, I started to attend the EMUs at CERN, and I discovered a program called Entrepreneur First, which is a talent investor. So you basically go there and you have to build a startup from zero and find a co-founder in an environment with other 100 people. I got a place, and in this environment, they give you an accelerated course where you have to try to build a billion worth company. So for me, it was at some point, if you go to the next slide, it was a very good experience. And I was struggling a bit with all the information I was getting, with the idea that ideas were coming out from there. Next slide. One day, though, I got a call from a judge in Switzerland, and she told me that she found someone for me to try to collaborate with. There was a guy from Lugano who was doing a robotic boy, very light, and no one knew him so much at the time. So I decided to go immediately to talk to him. And yes, if you go to the next slide, I found the perfect engine for my I discovered that anyway the idea was counting a lot, and I was too passionate about the boys to stay in London and do work on something that I wouldn't know where it would end up. So yes, next slide. I found this engine in Lugano, and finally I could combine it. Next slide, with my mark. So finally, I could meet all the requirements that I was having in mind. And this is January this year. And next slide. So if now I compare my mark with all the others in the market, there is a new one, which is the third one from the left, which just came out this summer. And still, I think our mark is something that has all the requirements that we need. So next slide. So now we are actually in a very good position because a foiling class in Garda Lake is willing to test it. So we have our early adopters. We are testing them since 2 weeks already, and the whole summer it will be used, and there will be media around. So at the end, I think sticking to my idea was really the best choice I've done. And next slide. So what I want to share with you is that despite you might have a very good idea, just be aware that what comes afterwards, it's also very important. So make sure that your idea is something you're really passionate about. So another thing I've learned during this journey is that I was talking so much about my boy, everywhere. Basically, I was mentioning it, and I got the best contacts thanks to people that I talked to, and I was not expecting them to help me at all. So just, yeah, share your ideas whenever possible, and yes, try to solve also a problem, because sometimes you might, yeah, think about something that is a problem for you, but you don't know if it is a problem for many people. So yeah, just get a lot of research about that. And then yes, pauses. Sometimes you might get frustrated and stop working on your idea, but I think it will come back. And then once you will be back to the project, you will see things from another point of view, and it will be much more rewarding, because you will see how much progress you have done up to that moment. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share. And thank you for the organizers. If you have questions, me and Ash maybe can answer.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for this very personal insight, Valentina. And also, again, thank you for you, Ash, for your presentation earlier. Now, for our participants, if you have any questions to our facilitators, please just unmute. You can also even turn your video off, and please feel free to ask them questions regarding on how to frame a problem and how to work an idea from the beginning to the end. Any questions from our participants? Feel free to unmute and post a question. Okay, I mean, if there aren't any questions, I would say we can end this session. Thank you again, Ash and Valentina, for your time and to support us in the Webfest. And all the best to you. And for all our participants, we see each other later in the update at 11 o'clock CEST.
Bye. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.